When you talk about riding styles, and you also had kind of a
Different
very unique riding style. So when I hear you talk about you studied and looked at all of them, how did you really how did you get your riding style? I mean, was it something that was supernatural? And then obviously the elbows, like, was that just something that was really comfortable for you to do, or is that something you did on purpose?
It was honestly, it's something that I mean, riding style wise, I've always told people that just kind of you need to do what is naturally, what you feel is good. Obviously now with the way the bikes are, I think kind of the head down and the shoulders kind of pulled over, helping the bike turn. That definitely is kind of the newer style. But back then, a lot of different things could work. And with me, I remember, I came from GP bikes, and then I did a lot of flat track training. So I kind of always had that posture with my elbows up. And I didn't race flat track, but that's all I did for riding. I had a TT course and a big flat track, and did all that stuff. And then there was a bike when I was 17 riding for Richard Stamboli. It was a Formula Extreme 1000, and that's back when they had no TC. They were animals. I mean, animals. And I could not feel the front end, and it was because it was my first time on a real bike with super stiff triple clamps, the big Öhlins forks, and I also just wasn't riding quite at a level where I was pushing it to the max, and I just couldn't feel anything. Couldn't feel anything in the front end, so I started riding with my elbows up just because I was literally bracing, like waiting for the thing to tuck, or just didn't feel comfortable with it, and that's kind of how it stuck. And then, I just kind of, the faster I went, I started like pulling my upper body down a little bit more, and then now what's crazy is a lot of people have that style. I mean, it's almost everybody, like in GP and some in World Superbike, not all of them, but I don't think it's anything because of what I did, but it's just the way the bikes evolved too. And I think I was just one of the first ones that kind of went towards that. But I've just, like I said, I've told you, see how Doohan sat on a bike, you saw Swans, you've seen people like, Jean-Philippe Rougia, he was up dragging his elbows back in the, early 90s. It's more just the comfort and being able to ride the bike as hard as you can and have that feel.
Do you think you say that you couldn't really feel the bike when you rode on the Stamboli bike? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard that even moving into like Yoshimura, the Superbikes that were insanely hard to ride at a slow pace. Mm-hmm. What was that, and how did you break through or adapt to be able to ride it hard enough to feel it?
I think a lot of people don't realize how difficult Superbikes are to ride and how stiff they are. A lot of people that they're pretty good on a super stock bike, they're like, oh man, if I had his bike, I'd do this. I mean, if you had my bike, you'd crash in turn 1 or 2 because the forks are like locked. Like one example, Greg White, he rode well, he tells his story.
5 minutes of fame. Here you go, Greg.
I'm not,
brace yourself.
I'm not throwing him under the bus. He said this, but
is this the same Greg White, the 5-time WERA amateur national champion?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I hope this is the Laguna story or something.
Yeah, it is. So he jumped on my super. I won the title early, so I got off the bike finally, and he comes and jumps on it, and he wears the same custom leathers I had. They're obviously a lot bigger, but
obviously.
And I was weighing 162 back then at that time. I think he was more like 200-ish,
262.
Yeah, and he even said that he couldn't even make the suspension move. He couldn't even get it. It was way too stiff for him. And it just shows that, when you're going a certain pace, it's not about how strong you are or anything like that. You're just using force and whatever it is. And a super bike compared to a super stock bike is so much more. I mean, you have the linkage, the swing arm, the triple clamps, the chassis, the fork, everything is so stiff. And if you're not riding it at the speed it's designed to be, you can't feel anything. And they're horrible. I mean, they don't have the weight transfer that a super stock bike has, and for me, I jumped on those and was better after being a year on the Stamboli Extreme bike, and but I just wasn't pushing it, to the level of everything felt like just perfect. I just kind of, the front end was a little bit vague, and not slow on it, but just wasn't at home completely. And then we changed a spec in the fork from '05 season to '06. And I'll never forget it. We were at Fontana and went out and dropped like 0.8 of a second. And I was just like dialed at the lap record, just like did 4 or 5 laps. And I came in to Tom and I said, listen, I said, if we can keep this feeling, I said, I don't know what's changed and where I'm at in the stroke or what I'm feeling, but if I can have this feeling at all the tracks, I said, we can win the championship. And because I just finished second to Matt the year before, and I kind of knew where Matt's pace was. And that's when it all clicked. Basically, that the end of '05, that winter, we got the forks where I could push the bike and I could feel it. But for most people, they jump on a Superbike and they are very difficult to ride. A GP bike is way worse. I mean, way worse than that. But even Tommy Hayden riding the Yost Superbike, there were a lot of times where he just couldn't get the bike to feel like he wanted, and when he would jump on a super sport bike, he could get that feeling right away, and that just the flex and the movement. So yeah, they're not for everybody, and they're definitely not as easy as people think, to ride, for sure. Especially back when they were 16.5 wheels, and it was just different, for sure.